Today, we were hit with some very unfortunate news for cornerback Terrion Arnold, who went out with a shoulder injury in this past game. That, according to Dan Campbell, he's going to be out for a while. He's not sure if he's going to be out for the entire season, but he's going to be down for a while. So let's get right into it. Now, with DJ Reed already on IR, we know that it's not supposed to be season ending there, but Terrion Arnold being able to play this weekend was a huge positive because it didn't seem like he'd be able to, but he was. And Dan Campbell gave him a lot of flowers for the way that he played against the Bengals. And now it seems like all we're hoping for is that he's also not out for the season for the Lions. But according to Dan, he's going to be down for a little while. And now, of course, that turns our attention back to what do we do at the cornerback position? Do we need to go make a move? And while I don't know that the Lions are actually going to make any kind of aggressive moves, last week or 2 weeks ago, we did a video on some potential targets for the Lions. I talked about a few different trade options, and I also talked about a free agent, a couple free agents, really one free agent in that video. And today, I wanted to revisit that. We're working towards that time where we start to get into that trade deadline discussion and who's available and who can your team go after. And if it's this significant for Terrion as well as DJ Reed, it wouldn't surprise me at all if the Lions took a swing on somebody. That doesn't mean it needs to be a massive trade, but it wouldn't surprise me. At very least, of course, they're going to go the free agent route. They brought in Trey Flowers, who they may like. They brought in Trey Flowers. They had him up for this week. Rocky Sin did a lot of good. It felt like watching that Cincinnati game. Also, on top of that, they do have some nice pieces with Devontae Maddox. Amik Robertson, of course, can just step outside or inside for us, so there's a lot of good flexibility there. Then hopefully at some point we get Khalil Dorsey back, listed with concussion/wrist. Was not available this past game. If Khalil Dorsey was starting on the outside, I'd be comfortable with that. If you told me it was Rocky Sin, Amik Robertson, and Khalil Dorsey as a starting three, I think against most teams, I'd be pretty comfortable with that. Obviously, it's not what we typically have, but I'd be fine with actually that lineup. There's some matchups that would give us problems. We'd have to give some support, but I'd be okay with that for the most part. We can continue to do this, but the problem is if I wait too long, there's going to be too many players. It's going to be overwhelming. So I'm going to slowly kind of work at this. So let's dive right into it with a veteran cornerback. This is a player that is not set to make a lot of money this year in terms of if you traded for him. The cost would be $1.5 million according to Over the Cap, which is very affordable for the Lions. I know that comes into play. Also, how much trade compensation do you have to give up? Do you have to give the guy a long-term deal? Doesn't really check any of those boxes. The trade compensation probably wouldn't take much. I think this team is in selling mode right now, and they definitely could be by the deadline. And also, you don't have to really extend him if that's the price point. You don't have to give a big-time draft pick. And that would be cornerback Rasul Douglas from the Miami Dolphins, who's actually played pretty darn well this season. This season, 12 reception allowed on 19 targets, a 101 pass rating, 3 pass breakups so far this season. And, of course, all of these players are just based on the film that I've seen. That's why I put them on this list. But Rasul Douglas is someone I've always been a fan of. I was always a fan of him with Green Bay. I hated dealing with Rasul Douglas when he was available because I always thought he was a problem with his length and his vision and zone coverage. I thought he always thrived in those spots. And then with Miami so far this season, I think he's done a really nice job. Secondary that's pretty much a disaster, and a front four that has been underwhelming for them. And just diving into the film, I was kind of blown away by like, oh, this guy's playing good football. I would really welcome this kind of addition because I've always been a fan of Rasul Douglas when he's on the field and what he brings to the table. A couple of things that stood out to me. First off, he's got some good length to him. He's pretty strong, so you trust him in some of the press situations. He could be effective. He's pretty controlled at the line of scrimmage as well. He's got a good downhill burst to close on routes. I think he plays with good anticipation, which he's always had, and some lengthiness to that, but he doesn't feel like he's necessarily lost a step at that cornerback spot. Footwork is consistent. He plays with a really nice pace, dealing with vertical route concepts. There's a smoothness to his game in terms of just consistency and his movement skills. I think he's got really fast eye balance, which has always been a strength of his. It's always been a superpower of his in the back end. He's absolutely willing to tackle. Like, my one concern was like, okay, I don't know if he's going to actually stick his nose in with Miami, but that went out the window. He was willing to stick his nose in. He has enough long speed in the way that he controls his vertical long speed to run with longer developing routes. He feels much more versatile. You could ask a lot of him. You can ask him to press. You can ask to play zone. You can play him in off man. He's going to be comfortable in a lot of different alignments and assignments that you put him in with really nice balance and zone coverage. And he does a nice job to anticipate when the ball is coming and get a step ahead of the route. There's some inconsistencies in terms of positioning at the top of the route, or maybe oversetting a little bit in the press alignment specifically. Playing a little bit upright at the top of the route can create some separation. But overall, I thought just his consistency in his footwork, he wasn't overly grabby. He's a very sound corner that's very flexible in what you want to ask of him. Always been a fan of Rasul. I think a lot of things align here where it wouldn't cost much. His price point's not that high, and he's been a good player so far this season. So this one really interests me. And these are guys that I think I can make a case for across the board here. Next up, let's go to a young player that, man, I've talked about him a ton going back to when he was coming out of Auburn, and that's Roger McCreary. I wanted to hop in here because, as you can see, I'm not home right now, but this is the perfect opportunity to let you know about my bookie. If you got a little time, maybe in a lunch break, maybe you're watching a 9:30 game game in the morning, you're like, this is horrible football, but I'm looking forward to that 1 o'clock window. I want to get in on the action. Or like for me, Monday Night Football, I want to get in on the action. I do that with my bookie. And if you use our code DOSE, any bet up to $500 is fully covered when you opt in using your bet back bonus token. I personally love to use it for same game parlays. This past week, I was disappointed. Al-Quani Muhammad wanted to get a sack. He had like 3 quarterback hits, but he couldn't bring the guy down. Everything else felt good except for that one play. But when you're that close, you got to do it again. I feel like I'm on the doorstep, okay? I'm due to hitting one of these. So if you want to get in on the action, do that with my bookie. It's the easiest way to do it. Any kind of sports betting. I know baseball is happening right now. Everybody's watching, all these Tigers fans. So this is a great time to get in on to doing that as well. Or like me, enhance your viewing experience for the NFL. Now, this one would probably be a little bit more difficult to pull off. There hasn't really been a ton of trade buzz out there for Roger McCreary, but this is just an instance of, hey, Tennessee's really bad right now, and they could potentially get something in return for a guy that's, it was questionable. Like, what was his future going to be? He wanted to make it work with Tennessee in the final year now of his rookie contract at 25 years old. $3.65 million according to Over the Cap if you traded for him, which is a little bit more expensive. And then, of course, you have the element of, would you have to pay him after this season? I also don't know that kind of trade capital would be given up, or you feel like you have to pay him if he plays well. I don't think it would cost that much. Move to just a full-time slot cornerback. So I don't think his trade value is incredibly high. I feel like this is at best a round 5 pick or something like that. Like, if it gets anything higher than like that, like obviously I'm not making this trade happen, but he is interesting to me because I think Roger plays the game in a lot of ways that feels like, okay, the Lions would be interested in this. 16 receptions on 20 targets, 164 yards, 96 pass rating allowed, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. But since he's been put in that slot role, it feels like it fits him really well. He came out of college, they played him out wide as an undersized corner, and it shows that he's undersized on the outside. But since they put him in the nickel, especially this year, he's seemingly been pretty comfortable there. And because of the flexibility with a guy like Amik, I think it's on the table that they could look at making a move like this and saying, okay, that's now our slot corner. Amik, you just kick out wide. And then we have Dorsey, we have Rocky Sin, other guys that can play out wide as well. A lot of things that I like about him. There's a ton of quickness, ton of short area quickness to his game. It meshes really well for a slot cornerback specifically. His body control underneath, he changes directions very fluidly, easily underneath. He could bounce him in a lot of zone situations. He balances routes pretty well with some of the footwork that he carries, high-lowing routes specifically underneath. He's got some real suddenness. He talked about working vertical routes or matching through a press alignment or putting himself in a match coverage where he's now got to work with a slot vertical. And he's very comfortable when he's in a trail position. He's very comfortable matching coverages. And I think the slot fits him well. It feels like he can get beat over top, but it doesn't show up as much when he's got safety help over top and he's got middle field support. And he can kind of just trace routes from underneath. And I think that's an area that he specifically strives in. He could read the quarterback's eyes pretty well when he's seeing in some of those off-man spots. So you give him some vision to the ball a little bit more. Schematically speaking, he did a lot of man coverage with Tennessee, or at least he has to this point in this season. So I think he would fit in well in terms of what you'd be looking for specifically. The short area control, there's a pretty easiness to flipping his hips and transitioning, again, very suddenly. His underneath zone movements are very twitchy. Some of the knocks, of course, length as a finisher at the catch point can be a little bit limited. Length as a tackler as well. He's definitely willing to stick his nose in. He tackles low. He limits leakage, but he definitely can miss tackles, it feels like, with some of the lack of length that he has. He also, to me, can have a little bit of problem as well just creating zone depth. Specifically, he seems very shallow underneath. He feels very shallow out wide. He feels kind of small out wide. So I do like his vision. He had a great pass breakup against the Rams, but I think it fits him a lot more for that slot role. And then being able to mirror match to the top of the route through route breaks, he gives up too much separation. For some of the quickness that he actually carries there, I don't think he anticipates it incredibly well, and he tends to lose real connection at the top of the route in breakers. Again, some of those outside routes that you would expect from more of a wide receiver, a boundary receiver, I don't think that fits him as well. So I think he'd be related to more of a slot role. You definitely couldn't overpay for a piece like this, but I think he would fit in terms of the way that you play. He's always been a guy that I've been a fan of. I think he's gotten better, and I think his role suits him pretty well right now. So maybe like a round 6 pick, if it was something like that, I think it could become intriguing for the Lions. Continuing on, I want to go to 2 players here and kind of bunch these 2 together because I think these 2 are in very similar categories. And again, we can do this with more players, but these are 2 guys that are definitely upside swings. Guys that really aren't seeing the field so far this season, yet at the same time, that would mean that the asking price would probably be very low for both of these players. And the flip side is you haven't really seen him this year, so there could be some concern of what you're actually getting. You'd have to go back to last year or maybe preseason film. But that being said, the first player that we have is a cornerback from the Denver Broncos that is not really playing this year, a young cornerback that still has 2 years left on his rookie deal. That's Chris Abrams-Draine, cornerback from Missouri. He played with Ennis Rakestraw. I always liked Ennis Rakestraw more, of course, but Chris Abrams-Draine, I didn't love him coming out of college, but I thought he was much more of a zone fit in the NFL. But remember, Denver plays a ton of man coverage. I think this past year when he did get the nod and he got opportunities, I actually think he played it pretty well. I mean, it feels like there's going to be issues like with more nuanced receivers, more veteran receivers, that he's going to give up separation. He's not going to be locked down in any kind of way. So it feels like it's going to be slightly developmental when you still bring him in. But there's a lot of talent there, and I think his skill set does play pretty well for how the Lions play. Level one, he can really close. He's very reactive in press situations. He transitions well. He gets off the line really well. Doesn't give up a lot of immediate space. He accelerates very easily when working underneath, closing airspace quickly. Those quick feet, very reactive underneath. He's got a smooth vertical pace. He can really get himself back into place. He paces himself very smoothly as well in off-man coverage, and two-man coverage is kind of where he lived early when they got him in this past season, and he did pretty darn well in 2024. But that said, still too much separation top of the route. I didn't feel like I always anticipated it incredibly well when playing underneath routes. He just felt some unnecessary footwork. When he's playing top-down coverage, he is proactive. He sets himself up early. He would kind of just park in front of routes, and at very least, he would hold very early leverage. Now, he could lose some of that through the top of the route, but he would hold very early leverage in coverage when playing off-man coverage specifically. Very low in his movement. But he does really have the footwork to press, and I think there's a lot of scheme flexibility within Chris Abrams-Drain's game. So for me, this would be a little bit more of an upside swing for a guy that's not really playing for Denver after some of the investments they've made there. Maybe that starts to change with Riley Moss, and they start to get him back in the fold a little bit. But it's something that's interesting if the Lions like him coming out of the draft. He was a former fifth-round pick. But what I do love about Abrams-Drain is the scheme flexibility, the dexterity, the change of direction. It's all noticeable. I think he can actually live on the outside. He's much more on a slimmer side versus a guy like McCreary, who is a very physically built, lower to the ground, tough to move off the spot. Quentin Johnston pushed around, it felt like at times. Abrams-Drain a touch when he was on the field this past season, but there's a ton of flexibility in what you can ask of him. You just need consistency in his movement and the false footwork and the transitions to stay connected. McCreary, though, I don't know brings as much flexibility, but I know I'm going to get a very consistent slot corner that's going to be tough, physical, hard to move off a spot, thrives in press situations, and really kind of lives in that slot role consistently. And then I'm also going to go to another young guy that's not really playing. He played last year over 400 snaps, each of the past 2 years over 400 defensive snaps, and that's Clark Phillips, now with the Atlanta Falcons. This is a player that definitely screams like, oh, that's the kind of way that you would think of a Lions player to play. But again, the issue here is Abrams-Drain just under 6 foot, a little bit more on the skinny side, but Clark Phillips is definitely on the smaller side. This is a player that I always felt was kind of much more of a zone fit coming out of college because he felt a little bit tight, so didn't feel like he had the best mirror match consistently. But Lions have had a lot of versatility in the way that they played. If you just want an intelligent player that sees it well, he's very instinctive, breaks on the ball in a hurry, plays like a little bit of a rocket downhill, that's Clark Phillips, and he showed a lot of that this past season. You're going to get some inconsistency. You're going to get some over-aggressiveness in zone. He's going to get burned a couple of times over top. That's just something you live with him, but he's played 0 snaps in 2025. He's got really quick feet when working one-on-one. He's very fiery against the run. He plays with really good vision in zone coverage specifically. Again, you're going to get some inconsistencies in zone. He's going to let some things get behind him, that's for sure. Probably be too aggressive at times as well. And some of that you might just have to live with him being a little bit younger and obviously also not playing so far this season. But I think his tape in 2024 was strong enough to be like, why is this guy not getting on the field at all? His statistical production was fine too. 94 pass rating, 68% completion percentage. He still has 2 years left on his contract as well. So from a pricing point, I mean, you could potentially get him for a very late round pick and have him for 2 seasons, which is awesome. Think about it. Meek Robertson's a free agent after this year. I mean, I'm just thinking about it from that perspective for a guy like that or Abrams-Drain, like 2 guys that you could get with multiple years left on their deal. Could open up a lot of flexibility. And of course, the Lions still having Ennis Rakestraw under contract, but having him not available right now just makes him a little bit thinner at corner. There's some other options that we could talk about, kind of preview to that. Greg Newsome, we've talked about him many times. He's going to be much more expensive, though, and Cleveland never seems to trade him. I like Greg Newsome. I don't love him, but Cleveland never seems to move him either, so I don't know that it's actually ever going to happen. It feels like Jarvis Brownlee. I was a huge Jarvis Brownlee guy coming out of Louisville. I love Jarvis Brownlee, but the Jets already traded for him. They haven't really played him yet, so maybe you can take him from Eric Glenn and be like, hey, actually just bring the dude over here. You wanted him? All right, you didn't love. All right, bring him over here. We'll do that. We got a connection here. I would love that move, but I kind of feels weird to think that something like that would happen. And a guy like Alontae Taylor, who I just think would cost too much. I mean, the price point to get him and then potentially having to pay him some big money, I just don't think that really makes sense for the situation the Lions are in. I think Rasul Douglas probably makes the most sense of all these guys. The 2 swings on some of the younger players is kind of like the Brownlee move that was made. The Lions may not feel like that makes a lot of sense right now, but maybe they do. But this is also a follow-up to the video that we already did. So if you haven't seen that, definitely go check that out. I wanted to add some more players to the mix. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Wishing the best for Terrion Arnold. We hate this news. But as Dan Campbell said, the train moves on, man. We got to find a way, get our best 22 on the field, offense, defense, and special teams. And I'm confident they're going to do that. I'm confident they're going to be fine here. But this does stink, man, because Terrion did play a very strong game. I love watching Terrion play, and this is just the thing it's kind of what's disrupted Ennis is just like we can't get consistent reps, and we hate that because we need that growth from him. So I'm going to leave it there. Shout out to my bookie for sponsoring today's video. Use code DOSE, and I'm out.